Okay, so just to introduce myself, my name is Lauren Hagee. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Public Art Program Administrator on the Verbena Park project. My email is listed below, but it's also listed in the RFQ on call for entry. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to reach out to me. Here's what we're going to go through today. A pretty quick overview of the public art program, just a little bit of its history and goals. I'll talk a little bit about the selection process and basically who will be reviewing these applications. And we'll talk about what are the required materials to submit to this RFQ. And then the really important part, I think we'll spend a little more time talking about Verbena Park specifically, a little bit about the location and the selection panel's goals. At that point, we'll take a quick break and answer questions, do a Q&A on the RFQ process for Verbena Park specifics. And then after that, anyone who hasn't applied for a call through call for entry, I'll do a little walkthrough of how you go through the process of submitting your images, your resume. Anyone who's a pro at it, who already knows how to use Cafe, you're more than welcome to jump off the call at that time. Great. So Denver's public art program, just for those of you who may or may not know, it was established in 1988 by Mayor Pena and was adopted as an ordinance in 1991. The program sets aside 1% of budgeted construction costs on new capital improvement projects with budgets more than $1 million for public art. So in this case, Verbena Park in East Colfax went through sort of a playground renovation, had a lot of work done last year. And so that 1% of cost is how we're getting this public art. Public art, compared to, art in a gallery, private artworks, has some particular goals and things that we really hope to achieve. One of those is that the artwork is site-specific and unique. It's not mass-produced or already existing. Instead, it's created in response to that place and the community which it resides. Our hope is that that public art can really speak to its users, whether those are residents or visitors. Many times that public art is going to, interpret perhaps the history of that place, the community, the people, perhaps even addressing a social or environmental issue that's important to the community. Our goal is that the artwork should, really enhance the site and the user's experience of that site. And then with Denver Public Art, a major tenet is that all of the artworks go through a public selection process. This is defined by the ordinance, and we ensure that this process is open, fair, and transparent. Giving the community, giving stakeholders from the community an opportunity to have impact on their neighborhood. It really also helps just kind of shift the idea of who is an expert in art. For us, we feel that community representation is as important as arts professionals in this process. So what is not considered public art? There's always exceptions to the rules, but in general, some things that we would not consider public art would be, again, those sort of mass-produced objects, things like bike racks, benches, often wayfinding advertising, as you can see in this image here to the right, wouldn't be considered public art specifically. Reproductions of original artworks that you already have. Again, we're really looking for a new artwork that's made in response to that location. Landscaping as well is generally not considered public art, although there are, of course, exceptions to that with land art. So in this image, if you can see just kind of a fun example, the Tremont sign with the map, that's not considered public art, that's just wayfinding, but this little camera that's included here on the right is a piece of public art. On the flip side, what may be considered art, it's a long list, it's always expanding, but here's sort of a general overview of, what we tend to see in our public artworks. Obviously sculptures, painting, murals, can also be printmaking, photography. Mosaics are very popular, for outdoor calls. It can be really quite a lot of things. So sky's the limits. Just kind of think carefully about the details that I'll talk about with the Verbena Park location and kind of decide, what medium might make sense for that environment. So as I mentioned earlier, the Denver Public Art Program goes through a public selection process, which is monitored to ensure fair and equitable processes and encourages a wide and diverse range of panelists. It's important to note that myself or the public art staff in general, we do not get a vote in the final artwork. Our role is to facilitate the process and to provide support to the panelists and to you, the artists, along the way. So we don't choose the artworks in the end. The panel that does consists of members who live and work in the community, artists, arts professionals, city council leaders, and then members of our public art committee and the Denver Commission on Cultural Affairs. We won't go into every step, but just so you're aware that the process of, selecting an artwork for a call is a pretty long and lengthy one. As you can see, we're really only here at stage 2, which is the application for the RFQ, which is the qualifications, not proposals. I'll talk about that quite a bit more. Actual proposals of what you might like to do in Verbena Park, we don't look at those until all the way down there at step 5. There's another visual that we use a lot to kind of just give you a sense of what that whole process looks like. So in black up top there, we've already created our selection panel. We've met with them to really talk about what's important in Verbena Park, what are the things they would like to see, and we use that information to create the RFQ, which you all have seen and are considering whether you want to apply to. So that call is open. We're right there in that yellow box. We still have a long way to go. After this, our panelists will score your applications. We will narrow down to a finalist group of usually about 3 to 5 finalists who will then have some time to prepare a specific proposal that they will present to the panel, who will then make their final selection of the artist and artwork they wish to commission. So while you may have some amazing ideas already in mind for what you might do at Verbena Park, at this point, we're just looking for your qualifications. We want to see images of previous work and have you respond to a statement of interest. So as you are getting your application ready, I'll just run through what are the required materials that you have to submit to call for entry. But again, if I go through it quickly, just know that it's all outlined in detail in the RFQ itself. So please spend some time reading that carefully. And if you have questions along the way, again, feel free to email me. Okay, so the RFQ requirements are 4 to 6 digital images of your past work. You can upload a video. We have 1 video allowance. Then your resume. The resume should just be about 2 pages. I'll go into that in more detail. And then a statement of interest no longer than 2,000 characters. So again, just a reminder, it's not a proposal, just the qualifications. As you prepare, consider how your images and your statement of interest can really speak to the goals listed in the RFQ and really indicate an interest in that specific community. If you haven't done a public art project before, or you work in a medium other than the ones maybe listed in the RFQ, maybe consider images that might speak more to the content that's and the themes and goals that are listed. Use your statement of interest to really express how you'd like to try something new, why you're interested in Verbena Park. Images, of course, are really critical. It's the first impression that the panelists have of you and your artwork. So really take time to make sure that not only are you happy with that selection, but that the images themselves are of high quality. Cafe will walk you through their requirements, but in general, it's a minimum 1200 pixels and JPEG only, so just be aware of that. But again, as you upload into Cafe, it'll give you those reminders. But we want to make sure that the images are, good lighting and really show the work that you've done. These don't have to be images of previous public artworks. So again, if you are an artist who makes artwork but maybe hasn't done it in the public art realm, still we want you to apply with your images. They do not have to be of previous commissions. We really encourage first-time artists to apply and yeah, to try out public art. So again, as a reminder, at the end of this, I will pull up Cafe and we can go through all the specifics if you're a little confused right now. If you've done it before, it probably all makes sense. All right, here are these two images, for example, just kind of, good examples of what we're looking for. On the left, we're looking at an interactive artwork, but it's kind of hard to see what the artwork itself is. It's a lovely image, but something that was maybe a little more close up would show the detail, would be a better impression for a panelist. Whereas the image on the right, the lighting is great, gives us a really good sense of scale, fills the frame, gives us a pretty good sense of the artwork. Excuse me. One other thing, if you have been involved in projects in the past that were a collaborative effort, you can include those images, but please just be clear in your description of that image that you were working as a group or perhaps apprenticing. If you don't disclose that, the panel could misunderstand your intentions. So, feel free to include them, but just add notes of, maybe whether it was done in collaboration with another artist. Resume, this part's pretty self-explanatory, but you're going to want to upload a copy of a current resume that's no more than 2 pages long for an individual artist. If you are considering applying to this call as, a duo or an artist team, please, with your resume, just submit 1 page per team member. And then please name it as we have listed in the RFQ, sort of last name dot first initial. Okay, statement of interest. Along with images, I think it's really important to stress how important the statement of interest can be to panelists. This, I think, is especially true if you are a newer artist who maybe doesn't have public art commissions in their images, or maybe if you're an artist that's going to try something completely new from your images. This is where you can use your words to impart to the panelists what you're thinking, why you'd like to try public art, why you would like to switch, maybe from painting to sculpture. Of course, the panelists are looking at images, but the statement of interest is really important and they do read it all through. So this is really a place where you can shine and sort of make that connection. That said, I recognize that a lot of you, you're probably applying to calls all over the country. So understandably, if you're reusing some language in your statement of interest, I just want to take a minute to say, just be really careful to proofread, make sure you're not referring to a different project. That obviously doesn't make a good impression on the panelists. And then furthermore, with Cafe, if you are copying and pasting, it can be a little glitchy if you're copying over from Microsoft Word. So just review it, make sure you aren't bringing in, some hidden characters or making sure it didn't get cut off. Our team recommends if you are sort of writing in Microsoft Word and you're going to then copy and paste it, that you paste it first into a neutral program, something like Notepad, and just review it for those hidden characters. So just some, practical tips there. For Verbena Park in particular, the statement of interest, which this is all in the RFQ, so hopefully you all have seen this, but The panelists are interested in having applicants respond to these questions in their statement of interest. So if you know in part why the Verbena Park project is of particular interest to you, how does your artistic practice align with the goals that are listed in the call, which I'll go through in a couple slides, how your design approach and experience has been working on public art projects, and any information or experiences you can share collaborating with diverse communities and stakeholders. Um, Again, those last two questions, if you don't have those experiences, talk about how you might approach it. Talk about why you'd like to, what resources you might use to support you. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about Verbena Park in particular. As a reminder, this park has a budget, or sorry, this commission has a budget of $54,500. And this RFQ will close on May 12th. So if you're still considering applying, just make sure that you have that in by midnight on Monday, May 12th to be considered. As I go through the following information on Verbena Park, it's really just intended to help assist you in adding some specificity to your statement of interest, or perhaps to help you determine if this is even a commission you wish to apply for. So as I go through, think through whether the goals, the location, materials, whether these things support the type of art that you wish to create, and whether this is a call that you're excited to apply for. Okay, so as I mentioned, this budget comes from a capital improvement project, where in this case, the Verbena Park received a playground renovation, a new picnic site, drainage improvements, and a futsal court. This was all completed last year, and they had a grand opening in May 2024. I'll show you some pictures of that, but if you are local to the Denver area, I definitely recommend just going to see it yourself. It's a really cute park. Um, in the project goals, it also mentions that the panelists are really looking for an artwork that is culturally relevant to their community. So we wanted to share just some quick statistics about the community of East Colfax. Verbena Park, sorry, I think I forgot to mention that. Verbena Park is located in the East Colfax neighborhood of Denver, close to the border of Aurora. And this park in particular is between 11th and 12th Avenue and Verbena and Valencia Street. So East Colfax, if you are unfamiliar, it's an extremely diverse community. There's a great mixture of ethnicities and cultures, a really wonderful melting pot. As you see in these images, we have pictures from Tibetan and Lunar New Year, Pan-African celebrations, and a really popular Salvadoran restaurant. It's an area that also really values arts and culture. They recently designated their own cultural district. So there's a lot to love about this area. It has let's see, 25% of the residents are foreign born and 10% are non-English speakers. So that's pretty unique as well. So yeah, dig into the neighborhood a little bit more. Again, if you're local, go check it out, maybe get some good food. But it's a pretty unique cultural community. Okay, here are some pictures from the grand opening of the park last May. So really great turnout. You can kind of see, just how invested the community is in this park. We have Councilwoman Chantel Lewis in the bottom left as well. Here are some close-ups on new elements of the playground. And I just want to clarify here for a minute that for this artwork, we're not looking for artworks that alter the playground itself, but I think it's, worth including in case, you might take inspiration from color palette, interactive elements, or, just the sense of play in general. It's a really beautiful playground, brand new, just kind of a fun spot for families. Another really unique element in Verbena Park that stood out to me, again, as another indicator of the cultural diversity of the neighborhood, is the inclusion of a futsal court. If you're unfamiliar, I was. It's a version of soccer that originated in South America, where it's a much smaller, harder ball, much more fast-paced, and it's soccer that's sort of played on a hard surface. Can kind of see in this image on the right that in Verbena Park, it's a combination basketball court and futsal court. Another great thing to know about this is the funding for the futsal court the money was raised by a local nonprofit called Street Fraternity. So again, just kind of speaks to the commitment that the East Colfax neighborhood has to this park. Okay, so this graphic shows you just kind of a top-down view of the park in general. You'll see the purple dashed lines. That is a walking path that surrounds the entire park. Um, then we have a softball court, a mixed-use sort of soccer court in the middle. The futsal court is just to the right of the softball court. And then the playground is in that sort of lower right side. The areas in yellow, they're just they're circled as possible locations that we've identified that could be good for an artwork. So, something near the playground, something in the open grassy space there on the right, or perhaps something that activates anywhere along the walking path. That said, these are not finalized locations. These are just sort of first impressions through conversations with the panelists and with the project managers from the parks team. Any artist that is selected as a finalist will have the opportunity to do a site visit and have a meeting with our technical experts where locations could obviously be discussed in more detail, but just worth mentioning, just, so you get a sense of the place. And here are just some images taken earlier this year of some of those possible locations, that big open grassy field, picnic area, walking path. One thing that's worth mentioning as well is there is no wall or structure onto which you might paint a mural. So if you are working two-dimensionally, just a note that you'd have to get creative as to where that mural might go, or perhaps incorporate a structure in your proposal, again, down the road. But just wanted to mention that as far for our muralists. Okay, project goals. Again, these are listed out in full on the RFQ. But project goals, I mean, these are the things that came up in conversation with the panelists that are going to be reviewing applications. So these are things that are really important to them as they're looking through your applications. So it's definitely worth really considering what they're saying here, what the keywords are, and see if that makes sense with your art or if it's something you can tie into in the statement of interest. So this particular panel is very interested in artworks that reflect positivity and that there was a lot of conversation about this park as a gathering space, as a place where the neighborhood comes together and celebrates, where families meet. So just hoping that the artwork can sort of reflect that same positivity. We already talked a bit about their desire to have their artworks, represent their community and be culturally relevant to the diverse group of people that live in this neighborhood. On a functional side, it's a park, it's outdoors, it gets hot, it gets rainy, it gets snowy. The panelists are interested in considering, if there's artworks that can perhaps incorporate functional elements such as shade and seating. As you can see in the playground, they're very interested in interactive elements. Not that everything needs that, but just something to be aware that came up, as they were thinking about things they wanted. And then, this call is open to anyone in the United States, and we welcome everyone to apply. But there is also a strong encouragement from the panel for any artists that are from the East Colfax neighborhood or have a connection with the area. They strongly encourage those artists to apply, even if it's your first time doing a public art commission. So when you write your statement, again, just think about these goals and where you might include some of these keywords, perhaps. Okay, and we're rounding out the end here, but just a note on materials and media as well. So obviously, it's a park, it's outdoors. The artwork, therefore, needs to be made from materials that can hold up to Colorado's unpredictable weather. And so in particular, that's partially why the panel is so interested in sculpture and mosaics. But again, that doesn't exclude any other medium from applying. They're just two that they called out as particularly beneficial for this outdoor environment. And one other note, just think also about the audience at this location. I mean, it's a park, so perhaps thinking that the work should be suitable for children in terms of content, but also in terms of durability, kicking, touching, things like that. Okay, so again, the RFQ, you've already seen it, but I encourage you to read it again really carefully. It'll have all this information as well. Another note that outside of Verbena Park, Denver Public Art, we have RFQs year round, so keep an eye out. If this one doesn't feel like the right fit for you, we'll probably have one coming up that is. We should have some on South Broadway and Southeast Denver coming up in the next few months. And then just a note on timeline. So after this call closes on May 12th, it may take a month or more for the panel to get together. They're going to review everything independently, and then they're going to come together as a group. So that can take 1 to 2 months. So, it's a bit of a wait, but feel free again to reach out to me if you're just kind of curious about where we are in the process. And if you are selected as a finalist, you will be contacted directly by me with email with instructions on next steps. So this is a good point. Yeah, we're about half hour in. I think we're going to pause now, and I'd love to take listener questions for the next 15 minutes or so. Again, these questions should be about Verbena Park and the RFQ, not necessarily about how to use Cafe. When we're done, anyone who wants that tutorial on how to use call for entry, I'll walk you through that. All right, so just a little housekeeping. I'm going to look first to see if we have questions in the chat. Sorry, I wasn't able to monitor that as I went. And then after that, if you could just use the raise your hand feature and remember to unmute. So let me stop sharing my screen for a moment here. Okay, chat. Okay, so I have one question, just how many artists will be selected? If that question is in regards to our finalist group that will be asked for proposals, it will probably be a minimum of 3, maximum of 5. It depends on kind of how stuck the panelist is. But so a small group of artists will be selected to create proposals. And then in the end, if the question is about, the final commission, that would just be, one artist or artist team. Yeah. Great. Okay. So it doesn't look like we have questions in the chat. Sophie, let's see. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi. So this is my first time interested in doing a public art commission. How long is the timeline usually for artists to complete and to work and complete on an art commission? And then also you touched on a little bit of the timeline on when the first step would be completed of when you would notify the first group. But I was wondering if there is a sense of a timeline of when the artist would get started as well.
Good question. So Hannah, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, I'm Hannah Leathers. I am working with Lauren as kind of the secondary on this project. Also work for the Denver Public Art Program. It's nice to meet you all. Yeah, so if to answer your question, it's a really good one. We typically move a bit slower than probably a lot of folks you've worked with. Cities, our governments are slow. But our contracts on average probably last about 2 years. We do have projects that from start to completion can be up to like 5 or 6 if they're extremely complicated or if something goes wrong. But I'd say the average from the time of like you sign the contract, you're ready to go to it's in the ground and done is about like 2 years. It also depends on the artist's schedule. If you wanted to work quicker, you could, and also can depend a little bit on the place if they have more renovations coming, more trees going in, kind of things that are out of control of the place itself. And then I think you had one more question about the time frame prior to that as well. So Lauren touched on it taking about a month or two for the panel to get together to review all the applications. Um, from there, after we select 3 to 5 folks that will come back and present proposals to the panel, the process does get a bit not slower, but we do try to be really intentional about giving finalists enough time to do research, to really develop their proposals. There's also meetings with the community members on the panel, as well as the project managers within the city to answer any questions you have. So that process, we typically give people about 2 months to really develop proposals. And then from there, depending on scheduling, after proposals are done, you can hear back in about a month. So I don't know if that answers all of your timeline questions, but yeah, overall answer is governments move a little slower than everybody else.
Yeah, it can be a slow process and definitely vary a lot. And with this one, since the construction, the capital project is already complete, we wouldn't be, trying to sort of align with the construction timeline, where sometimes that's the case in projects that are still being built. But yeah, it'll depend on the complexity of the commission that's selected. But in general, it does take yeah, a year or more. Yeah,
Thank you. That helps a lot.
great. Wesley in the chat has asked how, if I could reiterate a little bit more on how to represent 2 or more people applying as a team. It's a good question. If you're applying as a duo or sort of an artist group, in your images, if you have worked together before, obviously we want to see those images of your collaboration together. But if you have not yet, I would just be very clear in, say you are, providing 3 images from the one artist, 3 images from the other, however it works out. Just be really clear in your labels, your descriptions of the images, which artist's work it is. And then the statement of interest is where you can really indicate how your work blends together, why you're interested in collaborating, what benefits that might bring. And then with the resume, you'll just want to keep it to 1 page per artist, and just make sure that they're clearly labeled of this is John and this is Sarah, or but yeah, to not include like 7 pages of resumes. Yeah. Okay, great. Um, does anyone else have some questions either on Verbena Park or just the application process in general? Great. Okay. Hannah, can you think of anything else that we haven't touched on that could be helpful for artists?
No, I think you did a great job. Yeah, feel free to reach out to Lauren or I if you have any questions as you go through the application, but I think you did great.
Okay. Yeah, apologies if I sped through it too fast, but we can provide, can lighting be incorporated into the work? Yeah, absolutely. That is, something that panelists are often interested in. But just again, I would reiterate that at this point, we don't want a proposal exactly of how you might do that, but for down the road, just, say you are selected as a finalist, yeah, our lighting can be incorporated, it's just a matter of budget. Yeah. And that's where, if you were a finalist, where you have an opportunity to meet with project manager, technical experts from our public art committee, that's where you could really dig into more of those technical questions of, is there electricity? How might we do this, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah. All right. Well, if there are no more questions on just the RFQ itself or Verbena, then anyone who is already very comfortable with using call for entry, I would just, you're more than welcome to log off at this time. And we, really appreciate you logging in and listening to us and hope you apply. Anyone who would like to just kind of go through that process of, how do I create an account? How do I upload some images? Stay on the meeting here and I'll just run through a little tutorial there. We can pull the website up as well. Great. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again. Just give me one moment. Chat up. Great. Oh, awesome. Okay. There we go. Okay, so just switching gears. So CAFE, as we say, that stands for callforentry.org. That may be where you saw this RFQ originally, or you may have found it through the Denver Public Art website. But all of our calls go through Call for Entry. It's a pretty standard program that you may encounter for other gallery shows and likewise, but it can be a little weird the first time. So we'll just go through how you would register as an adult, as an artist, excuse me, how you would register and go through the process of adding those required materials. One other note, our calls on Call for Entry are always free. So as you apply, if you ever see an entry fee with one of ours, please contact us. Just so you know, ours will always be free to register. Okay, I'll just go through these screenshots and then I can pull up the live website as well. But this is what it's going to look like when you first log in, and you'll see the login option on the upper right. You'll notice that there are two options for artist login or admin login. You're going to want to choose artist login for this. And if you have never used this program before, then you'll go through the process of creating an account. So there's a sign up for free link there at the bottom. You'll go through sort of the normal process of choosing your username and password, agreeing to terms and conditions. It's pretty quick, and then you can create your own profile, which you can use then for numerous calls that you might find on Cafe. So you'll go through a three-step process once you're logged in, where first you're going to go to, if you look at these arrows up top, it's going to guide you through a three-step process of My Portfolio, which you're going to do that first of actually choosing your images and uploading them and sort of building that bank of images before you've even applied it to the specific call. And you can edit those and you can add more images than you might, eventually select for Verbena, but just start going through that process of uploading, making sure your images are the correct size, correct format. So building up your portfolio. Then when you're done with that, you're going to proceed to the next section to the right, which is apply to calls. And I'll go through all these slide by slide, but you'll be able to then search for the Verbena Park call in particular and start the process of applying to that one. And then at the very end, you'll go through the third process, which is checkout, which again for us will be real simple because there's no fee. Other calls, out there, you may encounter a fee, but you'll just kind of confirm everything and check out to submit. So first within my portfolio, as I kind of said, you'll upload, it'll show you how many, there's 100 in this example, audio, video, so build up that process. As you upload an image, it'll walk you through all of these questions, which can be a little tedious. So I definitely recommend giving yourself, a little time. This call closes on the 12th, but go through the process of adding your images sooner than that, giving yourself the time to make sure you have all those details of, oh, what did I title this artwork? And what is the medium? It's going to require that you put in the dimensions of each artwork. So please just do your best to explain sort of what that scale is on the artwork. Price, value, year completed, whether it was a public artwork, and then anything else you want to add in the description. This again is where it's really helpful, where say you worked as an apprentice under somebody or you worked with a fellow artist and it's a joint piece. This is where we really want you to put those notes in there that help us when the panel is viewing the images to understand the context of that. If there isn't anything to add, I don't think the description section is required, but just think if there's additional context that would be helpful for the panel to know. Okay, and then when you've finished adding your images, this is where, like I said, you will go to that second section of search for calls. And you will type in Verbena Park in the search bar, and I'll show you that on the live website, but it's pretty easy to find. Just type in Verbena and it should pop up, and you'll select that call and click apply. And then here's where you can add the rest of your documents. So there should be a section there to submit your resume. And again, you'll have it titled last name dot first name, and 2 pages maximum for an individual artist and 1 page per artist for a team. And then you'll see right below it is that text box where you put your statement of interest. So I was talking a lot about the horrors that can happen when you copy and paste sometimes. This hopefully makes a little more sense now because you're going to be either typing in or pasting in your response to those statement of interest questions there. So that's where you just really want to read through it carefully and make sure that it's actually reflecting the language that you want and that it didn't get cut off. And then you'll save your process along the way. And then when you get to work samples, that's where you can pull up your portfolio of images that you've already uploaded and start selecting the ones that you want to submit to this particular call. And then that final process is the checkout. Again, ours will have no cost, and then you just hit submit entry, and then you're done. When you go through that process, feel free, if it's your first time and you're unsure, if you want to shoot me an email just to say, hey, can you confirm that it was received? I'm happy to do that. I already did that today for an artist. So please reach out. Let me see real quick here if I can share the actual website. Okay. So this should look pretty similar to those screenshots, but you'll go to callforentry.org. You'll log in if it believes you. There we go. Okay. And then, yeah, just go through that process that we just described. So follow along this bar up top, add your images to the portfolio, and just follow its instructions on your image size. Apply to calls. This is where I was saying you could just type in Verbena. It comes right up. You can click more info. And then you can start your application. And there again is our statement of interest. Luckily, it shows you again what those questions are, so you don't have to refer back and forth. Oh, and one more note here that I didn't go over. After you do your statement of interest, it will ask you to fill out a short demographic survey. So you click here and it'll pop up in a new window. And then once you'll hit submit. And when you're done with that, you go back to the CAFE application and indicate that you have completed the survey. The demographic survey is just used internally for us to sort of track where our artists are coming from, age, just where they're from, things like that. You're welcome to click I prefer not to share for any question that you may wish not to, but just make sure you go through it and then tell us that you have completed the survey, which is a required check mark to proceed to the next stage. And so then you will submit your resume, save. I haven't submitted mine, so it'll give me an error. But after that, it's just that final checkout page. So yeah. Any questions on that? I'd say just try it, log in now, create your account, play around with, your images. It's pretty easy once you've done it, but oh, I do see a question here from Dale. Can there be a public input aspect like working with local kids? Yeah, if you were, you could indicate in the statement of interest that, going back to their goals, there was a desire from the panel to work with artists that are collaborative. So that if that's something of interest, put it in your statement, perhaps that you have an interest in working in that way. Don't go into all the specifics, of a proposal. But then, yeah, if you were the selected artist, there are opportunities to build in community engagement into your contract and to have that sort of inform the final artwork. Yeah, so it's definitely open for discussion. Great, cool. All right, great. Well, that's all from me. I'll hang on for another, few minutes here. If there's questions that, we haven't provided answers for yet, if you want to just hang on. But otherwise, thank you so much for attending. It's really helpful to go through this process with interested artists. And yeah, reach out to me if anything comes up, and we hope you apply. So thanks again.
Hey, Lauren, I did have a question that I feel like you kind of answered, but just wanted to follow up on.
Sure.
Does the Denver Public Art Organization provide resources as far as if the artist needs to partner with construction crews or anything like that? Like you're saying, if you were to do a mural to build a surface or seating areas, benches, things like that. What kind of support is available with that?
Yeah, I'll answer, and then Hannah, the public art manager, if she has anything to add, can jump in. But yeah, I mean, we have a lot of resources. We've worked with a lot of artists in the area and pretty familiar with sort of the common fabricators. We can provide recommendations or at least a list of resources to reach out to. Again, at the RFQ process, we wouldn't expect that you have like all of those details in line,
Okay.
maybe just more of a reference of like, I'm a painter who is, considering sculpture. I would work with, a fabricator, but I don't feel like you need to have, this name of the specific organization at that point. Just some recognition that you would, maybe be pulling in support. But But if you do want, some specifics, I think those those list of people, I think, Hannah, we can provide, but correct me if there's
Yeah,
any
yeah.
conflict there.
No, definitely. I can add just a little bit more info. So in terms of, like public artworks, there are very few artists that do all the services alone, right? Like they all
Mhm.
have teams put together, and like Lauren's saying, at this point in the process, that there's no need to, have in mind who that might be. But as administrators, Lauren and I and our team, that's what we're really here for, is to help artists, especially who have not done public art before, build that team, and to kind of go through the process. So, as if you get selected as a finalist, sometimes artists will work with the fabricator at that stage to either have them on the call, if they're nervous about maybe that qualification being something the panel will consider a negative thing, like, oh, I haven't done a public art project before, maybe having support of a fabricator on the call might help my case, kind of thing. But
Mm.
in terms of through the whole process, you can kind of build that team as, build the bike as you ride it, and we're really here to help in that way. And like Lauren's saying, we have a lot of contacts that we can share and recommendations of different people to work with. But yeah, that's kind of really our job, is just to help you fill the holes where you need support.
Okay, that's great. That's really encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Great. Dale, Wesley, did you have any additional questions? Nope. Great, thank you. All right. Sounds good. Okay, well, thanks all. I'm going to sign off and yeah, hope to see your applications. Have a good one.